Omar Alshogre has survived the brutality of torture and even starvation in his 3 years of detention by the Assad regime. Today he lives in Sweden and he joins me now from Stockholm. Omar Alshogre, welcome to the show and thank you so much for your time. Can you describe to us how you're feeling now that the Assad family and the regime is no longer in power in Syria?
This family has been in power for 50 years. They have tortured, they have starved, they have killed and displaced millions of Syrians. There's nothing that could bring a Syrian more joy than the fall of this family. All of them. It's not only the president, but his entire family has been part of torturing the Syrian people. We went out to the street in 2011 asking for freedom peacefully with flowers in our hands. And we were faced by the guns and the airplanes that rained death on us. And then we kept being peaceful because we believed the democratic world around the world will come to aid us, but they failed us. The world did nothing. We suffered in silence. We suffered alone. We dreamed alone. We hoped alone. We were killed alone, and nobody did anything about it. So today we celebrate, and we share this celebration with the world to show the world that we care. We care to be part of this world. We care to have freedom and democracy. So I am extremely happy to see those prisoners liberated and going back to their families after some of them 13 years, some of them 43 years of being political prisoners. So it's a very joyous day.
Yes, indeed. And you've been described as one of the very few to survive the so-called slaughterhouse of Sednaya prison, until yesterday, that is. Why were you detained? And can you describe to us what you went through?
I was 15 years old, and when the first protest broke out in my hometown, I joined not because I understood what it meant to be in a protest or to ask for freedom and democracy. I barely knew what the word democracy meant. But I joined because everyone was there. And even the girl I was in love with, she was in that protest. So I had to join, you know. And then from that protest, I was arrested and then released and arrested again. And last time they arrested me, I was at home with my cousins doing nothing. And they were attacked, arrested, taken to prison, and under torture, they force you to give false confessions. And torture includes things like pulling out your fingernails and hanging you from the ceiling. So you give any false confession they want you to give. And then you say that you killed officers and you have weapons and you spy for Israel and America. And
okay, we do seem...
on that.
So we did lose you for a second, but you know we know that at the moment the White Helmets are investigating reports that people are being who are being detained in hidden underground cells in Sednaya. Do these underground cells exist?
Sednaya is two buildings, the white one and the red one. The red one has 3 floors over the ground, and there's floors under the ground. Myself, I was under the ground for the first 10 days of my imprisonment in Sednaya. And it's much worse than the upper grounds. However, I know of one floor, but you see nothing when you are in prison. You see nothing, your hands on your eyes, or you have blindfolders, or you are required to close your eyes, otherwise they torture you to death. So you can't see as a prison, but definitely there are floors under the ground, and that's what I think people are assuming is the hidden places. They're hearing voices that people are under the ground. That's why we need to call on the international community to send any aid possible to discover, because this is probably doesn't apply only to Sednaya prison, but to many prisons in Syria. Prisoners are being kept under the ground in many places, and we need to discover where they are.
Yeah, I can't imagine the horror that you and so many others have gone through, especially in a place like Sednaya prison. While you were there, you know, there were, I'm assuming, many other political prisoners. Did you speak to them, and what did you get to know about them?
Most of the people in prison are the highly educated people from our country. The doctors, the engineers, the lawyers, the teachers, all of them are put in prison because they know of the corruption of this government. I was a little boy, so I tried to talk to everyone I could. We were not allowed to speak, so even under torture, you were not allowed to scream. Everything, you keep it very quiet, you whisper if the guard doesn't hear. But I never met great people like the people I met in prison, but most of them died during my time in prison. And I was lucky to survive because people cared about me for a long time, because I was, for them, a little boy, we need to help. I get out, and said the conditions in Sednaya prison is miserable. Imagine the guard coming in to your room of 35 prisoners and telling you, you have to choose one of you to be executed tomorrow. And we ourselves, the prisoners, we have to choose who of us is going to be executed tomorrow. So that's a simple example of how the life has been under the Assad regime. So when the regime falls, the whole country celebrates.
And of course, Bashar al-Assad, he has fled to Russia. Russia has given him refuge. Do you harbor hopes that he will one day face justice?
The road to justice is shorter than ever before. Even though he's in Russia, I think at some point we'll be able to hold a grab of him and bring him to justice. A person like this needs to be made an example of a dictator. If every dictator who commits crimes for 25 years that does not get prosecuted, then anyone is going to be a dictator. So it's very important that we work hard to make sure both him, his family, and the head of the intelligence services that were responsible for all these tortures and massacres, they need to be prosecuted. We need to put pressure, any pressure possible, to get that done.
And Omar, can you tell us what are your feelings about this, today's events, this coalition of rebel forces who are in control at the moment, in particular, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham?
My feeling is that there's nothing more important right now to me than bringing down the Assad regime, and the regime is down. Next step, nobody knows what it is. Next step is the Syrian people making sure they stay engaged in politics to make sure that not any group just comes and claim power. We need to have an election. It's very important that we fought for 14 years to have an election where we vote exactly what we want, not what we forced to vote for. So regardless of what group came and won this war, what the Syrians are heading for is election. That's what we want. That's what we're going to fight for. And just to remind the world that the world has kept silent for 14 years, did nothing, let us die in silence. So this group, that the rebel groups, and whether the world consider them extremists or not, they saved the lives of millions while the world did nothing. So technically they done better than 100 democracies combined. That's very sad to hear. That's very sad to realize, but this is reality. Democracies around the world did nothing. They did nothing. They watched us in silence die.
And if you say they did nothing, do you expect anything from the international community to contribute to at least a peaceful transition of power?
The fact that they did nothing doesn't mean that we should stay silent and never remind them and ask them to do something. We always have the hope. Humans are great because we have constant hope. We don't give up. And I think at some point we will get to some diplomats that they will encourage their countries to do something. And now the ability to do something in Syria is much higher than before, because before we had a dictator who doesn't allow any country to engage. But now we can bring the world into Syria. We can bring the media into Syria to see what's happening, what have happened for the last 50 years. It's very important. So today the chances are much higher. So I will engage with the world even if the world doesn't react. I will keep reminding them day and night until we have a free, democratic Syria.
Yes, and I just wanted to ask you about, the group itself, HTS. That is a Sunni Muslim group. How would other Syrians from other sects be feeling right now? And I'm speaking about Shiites and Alawites, of which the Assad family belong to. Do they have much to fear at the moment?
Let me give you an example from my hometown. My hometown is on the coast. It's called Banyas, and the majority on the coast in Syria is Alawites. Alawites have been the element that the regime used the most to kill the rest of the people. However, yesterday I called my sister who'd been hiding there for 10 years, not telling her name, and she told me that the Alawites came with the huge buses and they took the mic and apologized for everyone, and people started to hug. After 14 years of massacres, people are willing to forgive, not because they want to forgive, but because they need to move on. They want to move on, and Syrians won't let anyone take charge unless it's the ones that they choose themselves. So I think there's a lot of potential for Syria, a lot of hope, and as long as the Syrians are working hard to make sure democracy is achieved, we will have it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful message of peace there, Omar. And finally, do you foresee yourself returning to Syria one day?
I love my hometown. I miss my grandma. I miss my sister that I never met her kids. I love the sea, man. I miss it. So I'm very excited for the day to be able to return to my home, to the house I grew up in. Even though it's burned, we will rebuild it. So I will definitely return. I think it's very important. However, I cannot deny the fact that I have a great life in Sweden that I cannot just drop behind me and move. I have to consider everything. I lived half of my life here.
Okay, Omar Alshogre, really wish you the best, and thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.